Crusaders. I am Brooke Plack, your host today here on the Grit Crusade podcast, and I'm so excited that you've decided to spend this time with me. If you're new and this is the first time you've joined us on the podcast, welcome. If you're coming back, then you know you're in for a treat because this is where we get real in the trenches of life, relationships, and business. And today's topic is something that is really dear and present in my heart right now. So I'm really excited to talk to you guys about it. But I'm also excited to be back in front of the camera because, and behind the mic, I guess, too, right? Because I've been off recording for several weeks. So to give you guys a little behind the scenes of what goes on, I usually record 2 episodes at a time. So, I've already got the lights on, everything's mic'd up, and I've got my hair and makeup done. And for us ladies, we know we wash our hair. That's a big deal, right? And so I'll usually get 2 episodes done at a time. So that way on the weeks that I'm traveling, because you guys that have been around for a bit know I love to travel. And that'll give me, the time to be able to get these episodes done so that we can continue to launch this content for you every week and just to love on all of our listeners and our viewers on YouTube. And so today I'm back though. I've been spending some time this summer with my family. We did some traveling to Europe. We went to Spain and Portugal and it was amazing. Took my little 5.5-year-old. And so it's like, I feel like a big breath of fresh air as I get to kind of dive into what, it's a story that I'm going through right now. So I wouldn't say it's something that I've mastered, but it's something that I'm journeying through that I feel like through sharing with you guys that some of you will be able to relate to as well. And that is the topic of chasing failure. Dun dun. I feel like we need like a big, sound effect after that because we truly are our own architects, right? We get to design our own lives, but we are raised to do well, succeed, don't mess up. And it breeds in us this fear of failure. And so there's this book called Chasing Failure, hence the topic name today, that was recommended to me by my dear friend and podcast listener, Chris Henson. Thank you, Chris. I hope you're listening to this one. And it was written by Ryan Leake. And Ryan does a fabulous job of walking us through this journey of chasing failure. So today, you're going to get a little snippet of what that means and what that may look like in your life. But I highly recommend you clicking the link in our show notes and getting the book for yourself. And if you do click those links, we really appreciate it because it does give us a small commission on each one of the purchases that you might make. And that helps us to continue to offset the cost of delivering this free content to you every week. So, all right, so let's talk about what is chasing failure, okay? So in Ryan's book, Chasing Failure, he talks a lot about his personal experience. He is a huge basketball fan, and so I'm not going to steal his thunder and tell all of his stories, but I do want to share just few things, highlights from the book, and kind of talk about what is the difference between chasing failure and running away from failure, right? I feel like that we all can probably know what it feels like to run away from failure because that's where that fear creeps up. But what does it mean to chase failure? And so Ryan asked this question in the book, and it's something that I know a few years ago I had never thought of, but here it is. What would you do if you knew you could not fail? Right? I know. That's kind of like a big deal, right? I mean, what would you do if you knew you couldn't fail? And that answer, there is no right answer. That's the most beautiful part of it because you get to design your life. Your answer may look different from someone else's, and that's okay. But chasing your failure is also very similar, if not the same thing, arguably, as reaching your potential. So we spend so much of our lives, like I said, afraid of this failure, but failure is a key part of success. And most people that we deem successful in this world have failed gravely. Michael Jordan, greatest basketball player of all time, didn't make his high school basketball team. I cannot tell you on how many of my hard days I have thought that to myself, but Michael didn't make his basketball team. But Michael didn't make his basketball team. And it's helped motivate me. Oprah Winfrey was fired. What? Like no one would even think of firing Oprah now. Walt Disney lost a job at a newspaper for lack of ideas and then almost bankrupted his company in his expansion phases. J.K. Rowling, which I'm a huge Harry Potter fan and I'm wearing a snitch necklace. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see my snitch because I'm a big fan. But Harry Potter, the author of the Harry Potter series, J.K. Rowling, she was a single mother, broke, depressed, studying trying to get a job and make something when she started writing the first novel. What? And now she's one of the greatest authors of our entire generation. And Stephen King's first book, Carrie, I feel like this should have been a trivia question, right? Was declined, turned down 30 times. Michael Jordan didn't make his high school basketball team. Stephen King's first novel was turned down. What if they had stopped at that first door that was closed? But they didn't. They were chasing their own version of failure. So, what if we all began chasing our own version of failure versus running away from failure? So, before I dive in and tell you how this has shown up in my life lately and share a pretty intimate story with you, I feel like we're going to do our favorite segment on the podcast, which is trivia in the trenches. All right. So if it's your first time, here's how this works. If I have a guest on the podcast, I'll ask them the trivia question and usually try to stump them. But if it's just me and you, I ask you the question. And then hopefully I don't give you enough time that you can Google it. I mean, I guess technically you could pause the podcast, but that's on you. All right, here we go. You ready? In the 1960s, General Mills tried to make what salty snack into a breakfast cereal? Bugles. Oh, I know, right? It just makes me want to gag. Like all I think about is like my friends at the lunch table, like cafeteria table in elementary school, putting all of those bugles on their fingers, and they made it look like Freddy Krueger hands, and then they would sit there and eat all the bugles off their fingers, and it made me just think of all the germs that were going into those snacks, and it makes me want to gag. But here's what's even better about this. They didn't just try to do it once. They tried to do it twice. So the first time it was called Coronados. So that bugles in cereal, Coronados. And they had added some sugar to it, but they didn't really advertise the sugar. So it was a meh flop. Then the second go round, they called them sugar cones because they were trying to emphasize they put some sugar with that bittery, salty bugles. Didn't work either. And then this is totally irrelevant to bugles, but there's this whole article online that we'll link in the show notes of all these different cereals that General Mills did. And well, guess what? Failed, because that's what we're talking about today. Failure. In 1968, they had a this is so weird. They had a cereal named Clackers because it led to the sound when you were chewing it sounded like clacking and shattering against your teeth. And they were crunchy graham flavored rings, and they came with a duck call. What? Oh my gosh. I mean, right? It probably flashback to the 90s when cereal boxes still had toys in them. But could you imagine as a parent, the last damn cereal I'm getting for my kids is the one that's got a duck call in there, waking me up at 6 a.m. So there you go. There was our trivia in the trenches, and hence, General Mills, one of the greatest, strongest brands of all time in the consumer packaged goods industry. Failures, tons of them. And so it's not just you and it's not just me. So if this trend of failure can happen to some of the greats, people that we've all looked up to, you may not look up to every single person that I've mentioned, but somewhere it's going to resonate with you. Biblical times. I mean, everybody has experienced failures. It is the thing that makes us successful. It is the thing that helps us understand what's going to work and what doesn't work. But one of my favorite parts in the book that Ryan Leake talks about is if you don't really push to that point of failure, how do you actually know what your real potential is? So I'm going to use an example of weightlifting here, right? So if I'm lifting weights like bench press, okay, or curls, squats, doesn't matter. If I just do 10 all the time, I know I can do 10. But what is my real potential if I don't keep going? Put that into your life. If you're not trying it, if you're not pushing a little harder, if you're not going a little bigger, how do you know what your potential actually is? You really don't. So that's kind of akin or very similar to chasing failure. And so this story that I'm about to share with you is something that I'm in the middle of. So I try to be very clear on my Facebook and social media posts of the difference between transparency and vulnerability. So transparency is something I've gone through and now I'm sharing it with you. being vulnerable is something that I'm going through right now and I'm sharing with you. So, I did a podcast episode on gray area drinking, and that was a vulnerable episode. This is a vulnerable episode. So, when I tell you guys this, I want you to know that I'm not coming from a place of, I've got this all figured out. I conquered this. I just want to share with you where I'm at right now in hopes that maybe you can see that in your life and feel some of that same experience too. And so for me, chasing failure has showed up in my leadership journey. And so at Empire Kids right now, which is one of our operating businesses, that it's a youth recreational facility in Benton, Arkansas. We are in an expansion phase. And so we are adding a 12,000 square foot, brand new, custom built facility next to our current facility to move two of our programs in, our cheerleading and tumbling programs. Two of our biggest programs are moving in there. Okay. So this is a multi-million-dollar project for a girl who started out teaching lessons in her garage. And I'm still that girl. And we are in a inflammatory environment economically where our interest rates are at a 22-year high. That stat was released on July 26th, which is 2 days ago at the time of filming for this, right? So 22 years it's been since our interest rates have been this high. And so this is what that looks like for you in dollars. So let's say you were going to have $100,000 loan. Okay. That'd be average home, a small home price, right? Probably in Arkansas. That probably wouldn't buy a home in a lot of areas in the country in the US. But in US dollars, $100,000, when we started this building project, you would have about an $800 a month payment. Okay. That same $100,000 loan at our current interest rates, so would give you a $1,014 payment. Multiply that times about 15 times, and that's what we're looking at in the difference of when we started this project and where we're at in the project right now. Now, none of this is really actually about money. All of it's actually really about me and my mindset and my leadership journey. But we are a small business in the big scheme of things. Yes, our businesses, generate revenue of several million dollars a year, but like that's not big. That's nothing compared to Walmart's and the big chains and all of this stuff. So we are a very small business in suburban Arkansas trying to figure out how to pay out employment benefits and trying to figure out all the things that new business owners are. And a big increase in an expense coming led to me starting to doubt myself as a leader. And I started worrying, like, where am I going to get this kind of money? How are we going to pay for this? Like, have I bitten off more than I can chew? I I don't know. Like, should I have signed the paperwork? And I really started questioning myself a few months ago about, was this the right decision? Should I have just bloomed where I was planted and stayed there and been happy with the space that we were in and just made it work with our programs? And, we have a childcare facility that's a set up, tear down on our cheer floor every day. And that's very hard for that staff. And this move is to make our programs operate more efficiently. But I've also got to generate way more revenue in the process. And what if I can't do that? And so I started to live there. Like I lived there for a couple of months mentally and questioning, can I do this? Like, what am I going to bankrupt us? Like, am I going to be Walt Disney that almost puts us on the bankrupt or on the brink of bankrupt? Right. And it was a dark place for me because I'm normally like the cup half full kind of girl, and I always like see the best in everything, and we can do this. I mean, I'm a cheerleader, not just by sport and trade. Like that's who I was born to be, and like I can like lift people out of anything. And I was here in a valley, and I didn't even see it at the time. Like I didn't even know that that's where I was, and one day I started just really reflecting, and I was laying upstairs in my bed and I had my hands on my body because I believe a lot about an energy and energy transfer. And I was laying there and I was talking to God, and I was like, what am I going to do? And I do believe in the power of the mind, but I also believe that sometimes ideas and thoughts come to you from a higher power. And I started reflecting on where I'd been so far, that I'd come from my garage, that the first place I rented after I'd been there for 2 weeks told me I had to get out. I had 6 weeks to find a new space or the business was over before it ever even started. And I moved into that space and we tripled enrollments and we're out of room. We didn't have parking. We didn't have bathrooms. And then I bought a building and then we doubled those enrollments in 6 months and we didn't have parking and we didn't have bathrooms. And I'm stuck with real estate. And what am I going to do with it? And I started reflecting on this journey. And I didn't have a trust fund. I didn't have anyone investing in me. I've never had an investor in our companies. Like I built this and the team alongside me, and that team is still here. And if we did it then, like we can do it now. And maybe it's not all the exact same people, but it's the same roles and more. And like, who am I to question this journey? Like, I just happened to be the person that God put in this seat. Like, He was going to do this work in our community, whether I was in this seat or not. These kids needed that. And He just used me as a vessel. And who am I to get in the way of that? Because I have all the people, all the training, all the work ethic, all the resources to make this happen. Who cares if it's hard? And I was like, I can do this. I can do this, but I have to quit running from failure, from the fear of failure. Because at the end of the day, what if I fail trying? So what? At least I was trying. Plenty of people are out there failing every day and they're not even trying. They're just giving up. But I'm going to try. I'm going to take myself back to my computer. I'm going to sit in front of that computer. I'm going to get on my spreadsheets. I'm going to start doing revenue planning. And these are all the thoughts that were going through my head as I was laying in my bed that afternoon. And I'm not a napper. And you can probably tell by my energy that I'm not like a just sit and reflect kind of person all the time, because I'm usually going and doing. And that day, it was everything shifted for me. And it was like, you know what? We're going to make this work. We're going to figure this out because we can, because we have everything we need to do it. And there's no other option. And nothing happened that day. Nobody came in and wrote us a check. Nobody told us the interest rates dropped drastically and our payments were going to go down. Nobody told us that we have tons of families lining up to enroll. It was me literally changing my mindset about the situation, that either you can or you can't, but either way, you're going to be right. So which one was I going to pick? Was I going to pick the can, or was I going to pick the cannot? Lives. It's not all in a business that's making a big financial leap, but that's just where I'm at right now. It may be you deciding to go to the gym for the first time and work out. It may be you deciding, I'm not going to drink at dinner tonight. Maybe that's the big step that you're going to take and you're not really sure if you can make it. Maybe it's you deciding you're not going to hang out with a friend anymore, but you're a little scared because if you don't hang out with that friend, are you going to have other friends? But they're toxic for you. So it doesn't always have to show up in big ways. But if there's one piece of wisdom that I can share with you, it's this. Reflect on your past success to fuel your future triumphs, because you have a 100% success rate of getting through tough days. I have a 100% success rate of getting through tough days. You're still here. You're still standing. You're listening to this podcast, which means you're one of the most privileged people on this planet, no matter how big your house or bank account is. You have food and water and electricity and clothing. And we have an opportunity, not anything given to us, but an opportunity to go chase that potential failure. But what if you don't fail? Because if we're all being honest, we've all been in the trenches. We've all been dealt a hand in one way or the other, and we've all had hard stuff. But if we can pull that inner warrior, that inner champion, that fighter that's inside of you out in those moments of can or cannot, it will make all the difference. Until next time.
You've been listening to the Grit Crusade podcast with Brooke Plack. Our theme song is Thunder City by Lunar Ray, licensed through Soundstripe. This podcast was produced by Luminate Media Group. Thank you for listening, and we will see you on the next episode.